welcome everybody. So we are here for a couple reasons tonight. Our first section is to present the bond and to answer questions about that. And then we also scheduled another meeting for 7:30, but that's about Act 46 and sort of the implications for Sheldon. And the reason we wanted to do them both tonight is because the bond conversation usually leads to a discussion about Act 46, and so I think it's good to just have both of those updates in mind when we're talking about these things. So we have a presentation about the bond, and so we'll start there.
Just look at me and I'll
give you the nod. So this is just a little bit of background. The school was originally built in 1974, and an addition was added in 99. So we have pre-K through 8th grade here, and while we are structurally sound, there's definitely some deferred maintenance that is pressing at this point. So we did a building assessment, or not we, but the school board in 2016 did a building assessment to sort of give some information about what the immediate needs for the school was. And then we use that assessment to sort of develop the bond, pick out the priorities, and really focus in on the things that were pressing, that going forward into the future really needed to be addressed, so that we weren't facing higher costs down the road. So we have a variety of upgrades included in the bond, some code violations and general improvements. In addition, we have some site improvements, so specifically the parking lot and some access around the school to the playgrounds. So the bond total is just shy of 1.7 million, and it, like it says, it's designed to address some of the issues that we're going to talk about tonight. So at this point, we have a rough outline of what needs to be done. If the bond is passed, we'll move to the design phase where we're looking at specific, for example, the parking lot is something that we'll talk about tonight. And so that is really, those changes to the parking lot are dependent on the bond, but also on the town doing some work on the road. And so those will be conversations as we move to the design phase of the design phase of the bond that we'll start to address. So the first category that we have is building and site upgrades. And so these encompass quite a few different things, but specifically life and safety code upgrades and ADA compliance. So specifically the boys and girls restrooms, as well as the locker rooms, and then the bathrooms in the front of the building up by the gym will all be updated in order to meet the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements. We'll be installing a new fire alarm system. We have some boiler system and air handling unit upgrades. There are some electrical improvements for the building switchgear and generator. So the generator specifically, because, and forgive me if I use the wrong terminology, but because we're a designated disaster building for the town, shelter. Thank you. There's a generator that the town has here, and so the system that switches from electrical power to the generator right now is just a manual. Hazen has to come and turn it on and make that switch. And so part of that update would be to update that switchgear as well as that transfer from generator power to electrical power. And then we also have some site improvements for ADA accessibility to the playground. So I believe that's in the back of the smaller playground. The ramp to get down there needs to be upgraded. So, and please, if people have questions throughout, jump in, throw them out there. So general building improvements, these were some of our bigger projects. So we had exterior siding that's really in need of some attention. And within that project would also include classroom and lobby windows and exterior doors. So we would be replacing all of the exterior doors from the classrooms, which right now are full glass pane doors. And so we'd be pulling those. And one of the sketches that that Cross Consulting has provided us with has a door, so it's just half a window up top with a solid door below. It definitely improves safety as well as energy efficiency. We won't have as much glass, and so there will be less heat loss through there. So also with the siding would include insulation and really just tightening everything up so that our building's more energy efficient. So the other big piece of this is the gymnasium floor. So we'd be doing asbestos abatement, my goodness, in the gym floor and also the front lobby. And so we'd be installing a new rubber floor, which would be a multi-purpose because we do use it for things like town meeting, or they use it every day at lunch. So we want something that is multi-purpose and durable. One of the advantages to that rubber floor is that it doesn't need to be stripped and waxed every year, so we'll be saving costs there. So we'll be replacing a membrane on the flat roof portion of the building right at the front entrance. There'll be access control system upgrades, so we'd have key card access, which will increase security for students and staff. We'd be replacing the major kitchen appliances. One of the things that we've learned through this process is that because a lot of the things in the school are original, it's getting harder to find parts. And so most of the kitchen, all of the kitchen appliances, a lot of those electrical upgrades are due to the fact that those appliances or those pieces are at the end of their life cycle, and so trying to find replacement parts is getting more difficult and more costly. So we have HVAC improvements, and then the classroom counters and sinks in the west wing, which would include new cabinetry. Some of the plumbing doesn't include traps right now underneath the sinks, so those are some upgrades that those require. So these are just some photographs of the various things that we're looking at. So we've got the kitchen equipment. The doors that you see are the exterior classroom doors. The two bottom pictures on the left and center are the siding. So we have, it's a little comical, woodpecker holes in the siding. And then so we've put gutters on, but before we put the gutters, there's been rain damage and molding of the siding. And then that last picture, it's a little hard to see, but that's a crack down the center of the gym floor, which sort of, that got a lot of this conversation going because that's a very visible issue. And so that's sort of where we started with this whole bond, and that's sort of where we're at. So site improvements, and this is what I talked about with the parking lot. So the designs that we've gotten from Cross Consulting include changes to the road, which of course is the town's road. And so that's something we would be working with the town if the bond was passed to determine what the town would like to move. There's been preliminary discussions with the town. They are in agreement that it is a safety issue. Right now we've got the lower parking lot, so kids, parents, staff are all crossing the road to get up to the school. And so that was identified by us as a board as well as the select board as a concern. Because we have so much going on at the school, it's really not safe to have people crossing the road, especially on the grade that the hill is. It gets pretty icy. And so there's that piece. If the town decided that they weren't able to move the road the way the site plan that we have calls for, we would still be looking at doing loading and unloading zones, putting in curb cuts and islands so that we could have dedicated bus lanes so that we don't have, like if you come in the morning, it's kind of chaotic because there are cars and buses everywhere. And so we'd be looking at traffic patterns and trying to improve that. Make it just more of a flow out to Port Farm Road and then out to 105. So definitely a lot of, there'll be a lot going on in the parking lot regardless. And so this is the site plan A, which is what Cross has proposed. So it includes moving that road, but also installing some islands and then making another entrance into the driveway, if you can see in the bottom right corner, just in hopes of creating, sorry?
Just usually the little white piece underneath.
Yeah. So we'd be looking at creating traffic patterns so that we don't have kids and parents and crossing in front of buses, having cars coming ahead of the buses. There'd be a dedicated bus lane. And it would also add parking spots up at the top, so we wouldn't have as many people having to park in the lower lot. So these are the estimated total project costs. We have a construction cost, and there's a project contingency, built in, and then the design and permitting fees for a total of $1.7 million. So this is the proposed article. This is what will be voted on at town meeting, also in the town report. So this is the financing schedule. We use the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank. It's a 20-year term. And you can see the schedule of repayment based on principal and interest.
Do we need to use the Vermont Municipal Bank? Can we just use the local bank, or do they extend that much money?
They might. Would be very atypical to use a local bank. I'm not sure if they would or not, and I'm also not sure that the rate would be this competitive. This is what the purpose of the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank is for municipalities. One of the things I love about the bond bank is, well, two things actually. The entity itself supports schools very, very well, so they really watch out for us, and they also, if they refinance the bonds over the course of those 20 years, any savings comes to us. Sheldon actually just got a small bond repayment financing from 15 or 20 years ago. It's only $900, but still it's nice when we get that savings and they don't keep it. I'm not sure a bank would do the same.
No, but the rate is 0.5% more, it makes the overall cost a lot different.
I don't think we'd get this rate from a local bank. I think it would be much more, a much higher rate.
And so this leads us, what I mentioned before, that Act 46 conversation. So we unfortunately can't give a tax rate based on an approved bond because we currently don't have a budget proposed. This is due to the fact that the state has ordered Sheldon to move into the Northern Mountain Valley Unified Union District, and due to because there's a lawsuit that's pending, an agreement was made that the organizational meetings for those new districts would be delayed, and so that new district was not able to create a budget because the two Sheldon members have not been sworn in, and so they're not able to hold meetings at this point. I believe they're looking at scheduling those meetings, however, it wouldn't have been in time for town meeting. And so Sheldon, as a school at this point, will not warrant a local budget. We are being ordered to warrant a budget as part of that larger district. So we can't give a tax rate. However, we can discuss what the tax rate impact of just the bond will be, which would be 11 cents. Sorry.
1.1. It's point. The decimal point's in a bad spot.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it's 1.1 cent.
Not sure why I kicked it over like that, but.
So on a $200,000 home, this would be approximately $22 a year. And so that doesn't include any other factors, and that's important because the bond is one small piece of the whole tax rate calculation. Laura was gracious enough to bring this to the board of the way that they calculate the tax rate. And we were able to look at a lot of different factors in anticipation of trying to develop something that's as cost effective as possible. But at this point, this is the certain number that we can give. Providing a budget at this point is not something we've been able to warn for town meeting. So the second bullet is also, so if we are to, I want to make sure I'm getting my timeline correct. So Sheldon is part of the litigation against the state trying to stop Act 46. So if we are merged, the bond that Sheldon passes will be spread out among the towns that Sheldon is merged with.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if Sheldon is not merged, the bond will remain with Sheldon. And in developing this bond, that was something that was on the forefront of all of our minds is, regardless of a merger, we want to make sure this is something that Sheldon as an individual town can afford. And so we were trying to be very thoughtful in the things that we put into the bond. But those are the two scenarios that we may find ourselves in.
So can the district that we're merging would decide they don't want to do this if they wanted to?
I don't believe so, not if it's been passed by us. Because that new district doesn't start until July 1st, the things that we do right now are serving in Sheldon's
So
control.
if a bond did pass, or the bond passed and we did go Act 46, this would prepare to the, whatever district, it would be dumped into that whole district?
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't be
Of course,
local
the
control.
The school in that district does the same thing we're doing.
But I do believe some of those schools already have current active bonds, right?
They do. Yeah, so
They do.
They pick up the remainder of theirs and they pick up ours.
Yeah.
Right.
So the schools that we've been forced to merge with are Berkshire, Bakersfield, and Montgomery. Berkshire had a bond 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 2, yeah. They're the only one with a bond. I know that Montgomery's school is relatively new, but I'm not sure if that was a result of a bond or not. And so, yeah, so if we passed a bond and we were,
To merge,
To
everybody
merge.
would
Yeah.
concur the bond?
yep,
Okay,
yep,
that's the question I was asking.
yeah.
You're saying our payment would be $150,000 a year? 85 plus the 76 interest?
In year one, you'd only be paying $45,000. You only pay interest on year one of a bond. Year two, you start principal and interest, and that would be 85 plus 76. And then every subsequent year, of course, your interest portion would keep decreasing. So that's the worst case scenario would be the 76 and the 85. That'd be the worst year.
Just that first year.
Right, but that
The
year's gonna
second
cost
year.
us 6 cents. Because our grand list is 250,000 or whatever it is, so if you divide that into 150, it comes to 6 cents.
We have no way of knowing what the impact will be because we don't know what their other factors are. At the state, your tax rate calculation is done at the state level. It's not done only with Sheldon. So it depends on what the yield is set at, what your equalized pupil numbers come in at, so basically statewide spending. Your CLA, your common level of appraisal, has a huge impact. So, I mean, any guess would be a complete shot in the dark at this point until you have those other factors.
I realize that, but just looking at what our grand list is to whatever this payment is would be 6 cents. And if all them other factors come in, we could pay 10 cents. It'd be at least 6 cents.
Or less, it could be less.
Right, because we'd be looking at fiscal year 2021 for the first year,
But if
right?
the grand list stays the same.
But the grand list is
It's not, it's, right, but the grand list and the CLA is only one small factor. When the state looks at the ed spending that has to be raised, which is how they create the yield, it's the state spending and revenues across the whole state that determines that yield, which is set by legislature. That is one of the largest factors that impacts your tax rate.
And then your equalized pupils.
And then your equalized pupils.
Which it's impossible to really calculate what that would look like given a merger or non-merger
Right.
scenario.
Right, right.
And then your property values, which is what you're talking about, come into play. I wish we could calculate it out that far. It just doesn't work that way anymore.
So this is our informational meeting tonight. And I would open it up if there are questions.
So we're not gonna be voting on the school budget at all, it's just gonna be this bond?
No, so what we'll have to do
This
is,
stuff.
well, not at town meeting.
Right.
Right.
We will vote on a budget at some point, whether it's a merged budget or an individual Sheldon budget is still up in the air.
Are they voting on the bond at the meeting?
Yes.
At town meeting.
Yes.
It'll be Australian ballot though.
But at the meeting?
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
On December.
Ain't gonna be like the school budget, we usually do it all day long. It's
Right, the
gonna be that way?
bond.
Yeah, the bond will
it's-
be that way.
Be like the school budget, yeah, it'll be all day long.
Yeah.
Is this the first informational meeting folks have had?
Yep.
I know we talked about changing the road when I was on the select board,
Mm-hmm.
and we were thinking about moving it down below the garden center and come out and by Alan Bolio's house.
Yeah, yeah.
And the only way we could have done that when we were on the board, in which we talked about it, but it was gonna cost money, and we were gonna help do it because of the kids' safety.
Mm-hmm.
Because today, insurance-wise and everything was safety, and the only thing is, the state would have us use only one entrance off 105.
Yeah.
So we would lose the entrance we got now, and they would move it down there, and then you would drive off that road, which would be called the Poor Farm Road, onto the school, into the school, which would be a lot safer.
Yeah, yeah.
That's been talked and tossed around before we even built the new town clerk's office. So
Yeah.
it's a no-brainer as far as
Mhm.
safety-wise.
Yeah, yeah. Especially because, you know, as we've discussed this, there's a lot more going on than just school activities here now.
Mhm.
So you have a lot, you know, the community's in and out constantly.
And a kid would have to walk down the road and go to the road, which is a lot harder to do than just to go from here to the road.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think another thing was brought up when we were on that issue was about a caution light out to the road during school time, because right now the one that works out front works part-time, and sometimes it gets forget to turn on, and sometimes it's working on weekends when there's no school. That was brought up to, I think the sheriff's department knew about it, the state knew about it a couple times.
Yeah, and I think so the site plan that we're proposing for the parking lot has Poor Farm Road moving slightly, but and that sort of making it like a straight shot out to 105. You know, when we've talked with the select board, that would be ideal, but it is very costly. So we thought that having cross-draft this site plan A.
Might be costly, but if you lose a student, it's gonna be a lot more costly.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So that piece of it will sort of be up to the town.
Yeah.
And we'll take direction from there, depending on what they want to do. But either way, we'll have traffic flow updates within the parking lot.
But we had that discussion when we were gonna move the town clerk here, instead of where it was with Peter Cross,
Yeah.
Cross Consultant.
Mhm.
We had been through all those numbers with them on that.
Okay.
But then I came into a safety issue because you didn't want the fire department right next to where the school was, because the kids would, you know, the trucks leaving and coming in,
Yeah.
which just made sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you want to just mention when the work would be done? I think it was in one of the
Oh.
slides, but we maybe.
Yeah. So we, at this point, we'll be looking at doing some smaller projects in the summer of 2019, so this summer. But most of the larger projects will be done in 2020, over the summer, just to try and reduce the impact on the school in terms of, you know, doing projects like this while kids are here is not fun for anybody. And so just in terms of planning and getting designs drafted, most of the work would end up, being done summer of 2020.
The asbestos issue,
Mhm.
what is that, asbestos in the floor tile?
Yep,
That's the end of your asbestos, correct, after that's done?
I believe, yes.
Sheldon is in compliance now. They have an asbestos abatement plan and a management plan, so there's no risk to students or anything, and that has to be followed and inspected every 3 years, and 6-month periodic inspections have to happen. So there's no risk to students right now, but anytime you're doing a large bond, of course, it makes sense to do the abatement along with that.
Yeah. So I believe, Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, it's everything from those double doors, you came in right here and forward to the gym.
That's original tile.
Mm-hmm.
Do they know what percentage the asbestos is in the floor tile? Is it a high enough percentage so they have to have somebody come in and seal off the area when they do it? Or can it be taken up without a containment?
It would need to be contained.
It have to be
Yeah,
contained?
yeah.
But the town clerk had to be contained. That's because they had glue on the treads going down to the basement.
Huh.
They glued the carpet in.
Even after we do this abatement, shall I say we, after Sheldon does this abatement and they are known to be asbestos-free, the federal law still states that every time you disrupt any material in a school, it has to be tested, even if you have an architect that says there's no asbestos here. Because apparently there were periods of time when tile and mastic and stuff was coming down from Canada and their rules were different. And so anytime a school disrupts any material, all materials that are being disrupted have to be tested for asbestos.
Very good. So you have another informational meeting before town meeting, no?
No, this will be it.
They're not gonna meet on the budget, because they're not on the budget.
Right.
But you're gonna have these things, flyers out so people can look at them.
Yeah, yeah, so there's an ad that was in the paper, and then we'll have these available. They're available at the school, in town clerk's office, and then we'll have them the day of as well.
I know bonds aren't easy to get sometimes. It takes 2 or 3 votes to get through them sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Cost of stuff just keeps going up, so.
Right. Right, and we're sort of at the point where repairs are becoming more costly because it's things that maybe we haven't been able to address.
Right.
Our maintenance budget is not very large, and so it was difficult to think about working any of this in a cost-effective way. And so it's been a process, I would say. I'd say we're over 4 years of trying to create a bond and then be very thoughtful around the tax implications, because I know the last couple of years we felt that the tax situation was not the right time, but we've sort of come to the conclusion this year that we're at that point where we need to make some improvements or face some more costly issues.
The siding, are they completely taking the siding off and replacing it? Or are they repairing?
So they'd be, I believe they'd be replacing and they'd be putting more insulation
Do
in
they have any
it.
idea what they're putting on?
So the initial,
Hardy board.
what they brought to us was
This
cement
hardy
board.
Yeah, like a cement board.
Yeah,
Oh,
But it's
okay.
to be determined at this point.
right,
Mhm.
right.
I think it's to be determined as if the current material is removed or just gone over also. I don't think that's been
Mhm.
determined yet.
I'll tell you the best thing is when we did a town clearing, nobody wanted it done, but we ain't gonna worry about maintenance, that's brick.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When the wind blows like this, you're still fine, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't fade, and it doesn't go away.
Right, right. Yeah, we've talked about a couple different, like, some sort of metal had come up, and then we were worried, well, what happens when
Yeah,
soccer
you-
balls get kicked at it and you get a big
Painted,
dent?
repainted.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
thought the same thing at town clerk, when we built the town clerk to town, and in the back, we were gonna do vinyl, because nobody could see it. I says, why would you do that? The rest is all brick.
Yeah, yeah. So we were trying to balance between aesthetics, making it look nice, but making it as durable as possible, so that we weren't having to come back in 10 years and make,
Right.
replacements. With the wood siding, it
Doesn't last.
It doesn't.
Pretty
last.
good, 45 years.
Yeah.
And you say for the woodpeckers, that's what they like is cedar.
Yeah.
Something's off.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we have, if there are more questions, we have until about 7:30.
No, I think you had a pretty good presentation, guys.
We will have an Act 46 update. I want to give people, anybody who's coming for that, though, some time to come because we haven't scheduled it till 7:30.
I could do it now and then do it again at 7:30 if other people come.
Sure.
Because I don't want to have people sit for half an hour
Right,
for
right.
no reason, and then, but I will stay. If one person comes at 7:30, I'll stay for that too.
So,
But I don't want to cut short any other questions about the bond, because
That was
it's
my next question.
not very often that
It's
people.
a scary thing to think that we're voting for this bond and not knowing whether we get to pay for it all by ourselves or whether it goes into this merger.
Mhm.
And then we're talking about not even knowing what our budget's gonna be, and we're not being able to vote on the budget for the same reason. That's a little scary for me to have this all up in the air.
Absolutely.
And for me to make a decision about whether I want my taxes to go up that much. So I think that's probably gonna lead into what you were gonna talk about in this house.
Yes, not that I have answers, but I can tell you what the,
As a body, it's sitting at that table right there. What do you guys all think of Act 46? I'm putting you on the spot right now.
That was for you guys.
is that for us or them?
you're the board.
People sitting at the table. They're all sitting at that table. What is the
Doesn't
thought
matter,
of
right?
Act
I mean, we
46?
don't have any choice, right?
Well,
Looks to me
so
like we're being bullied into this, whether we want it or not.
how about we move into the Act 46? We'll do that presentation because that brings us through a timeline, and you might get an idea about how we feel.
How do you really? Okay.
I know I've read an awful lot about it.
Yes.
A lot of discussion, a lot of things in court. Everybody's mad. Some people are glad.
Well, and that's the thing, I mean, there's so much out there. In the newspaper, right after they had, whether it was a court hearing or the legislative vote, they had wrong information. It wasn't terribly wrong, but it was enough that it was misleading to people. I'm getting texts from friends saying, "Oh, good, you don't have to merge now." I'm like, well, that's not actually what happened. You know, there's so much confusion out there that I just thought, and the board thought, since we're going to have an informational meeting, and people do have questions about how one relates to the other, that we could do sort of a status update. We keep hoping we're going to have a definitive answer next month, and it never seems to happen. But I thought I would at least put together sort of the timeline and what's been going on just this year. So, most of you know, please don't, I'm just trying to be thorough here. The state board had its final decision on the 28th of November. The report was issued on the 30th of November. And that was the formal decision that Sheldon would be part of the Northern Mountain Valley Unified Union School District. There's 2 years in there, but I only put in one. As of July 1st, 2019. And that would be a pre-K 8 operating school tuitioning high school kids. So they took Berkshire, Bakersfield, Montgomery, and Sheldon, like operating systems, and create a single district. Now, the Northern Mountain Valley Unified School District already voted to merge. They exist as an entity. They're not operating yet, but they exist. And so Montgomery and Sheldon were assigned to it with the state order. And that means, of course, that Sheldon kids would still attend Sheldon School, and high school students would still have school choice. I think that was the #1 question that we've had from the community, is what does this mean about school choice? Because it's very important to people in Sheldon. There would be no change in this merger about school choice. The merger does require that Sheldon would leave Franklin Northwest Supervisor Union, and because Franklin Northwest SU will cease to exist July 1st, again, if nothing changes. Under this model, Sheldon School would be a part of the NMVU, which is a side-by-side with the Enosburg-Richford School District, and then the NMVU School District would be side-by-side underneath the umbrella of the Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union. So this is from one of their documents. It was before Sheldon was in there. That's why Sheldon looks weirdly larger than the other, because I just typed it in. So an SU is sort of a management structure, so that if you have more than one district, you have to have an SU. So the Franklin, Highgate, Swanton MVU would be a district, but wouldn't have an SU anymore. And Franklin Northeast would be responsible for Sheldon. So in October, this board signed on to an appeal of the State Board of Ed's decision. So they knew it was going to happen by November 30th, that the final decision would be happening. That was in statute. And this board signed on to the lawsuit, which is an appeal of the State Board's decision. It was filed in December. There were some conflicts with the judge. Some of you may have read in the newspaper. The judge in Washington County, where the suit was first filed, had a daughter who was on one of the school boards that was in the lawsuit. So had to recuse herself, and the court was reassigned to Franklin County to Judge Mello. All of those things takes time. So again, now we're into January. Then there was an interim scheduling agreement between the Vermont Attorney General's office and the litigants in the appeal. Sheldon is part of that. And they decided to delay the organizational meetings for a month. That was so the state could make its case, but also the attorneys for the appeal were really wanting to get an injunction or have the judge hear the case before they really start organizing these meetings. So it sort of suited both parties. Franklin Northwest, the MVU district, had something scheduled that then we had to cancel. NMVU had a less formal organizational meeting scheduled. They already exist, but because they were having Montgomery and Sheldon join, they were going to do an organizational meeting again, swear in the new board members, and talk about how they're doing business. Because that district's attorneys believed that they were subject to this delay as well. So they haven't really had a meeting, and if they wanted to, they can't have a quorum because they had 4 members on their board. And with the addition of Montgomery and Sheldon, that's 8 members. Unless you have people from Sheldon and Montgomery joining you, and they're both in this lawsuit, they don't have a quorum, so they can't really develop a budget. So that's been part of the reason why there's been a delay for Sheldon. And it wasn't a stay. When that interim agreement happened, there was a lot of buzz out there that we had a delay or we had a stay. It was just an interim agreement. And it ran out first week of February. 3rd week of February, pardon me. So, it's probably what I just said. That meeting really hasn't taken place yet. Last meeting they had, I think, was January 9th. I don't think they've had a meeting since then.
Canceled? January and February were both canceled.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, because we were
Yeah,
we were at the one in January.
Yeah, and December there wasn't a quorum.
There wasn't a quorum in December, so
They haven't met for a while.
they have not. So again, that's part of also why, even though they have all the information, they haven't warned a budget for town meeting, because those dates have passed. In town meeting, you need 30 to 40 days in order to publish and warn that adopted budget. Once we hit the end of January, we were all past being able to warn local budgets, even if we were able to do that. So you've also heard, I'm sure, about the lawsuit and the fact that Judge Mello heard arguments from the state and the folks appealing the state board order. On February 15th, it was 2 hours on that Friday, and both sides made their case, and the appeal folks were really pushing for a preliminary injunction. So were that to happen, all merger activities would stop until the court made its decision. Now, this judge has stated that he'd like to make his final decision before the end of the year, meaning June 30th, fiscal year. That's not all that helpful because you have to build budgets and you have to hire teachers and you have to conduct business. So an injunction, if there's going to be an injunction, we really need that now, sooner than later, so that we can know. Right now, that was over a week ago, and the judge has not made his decision. He had a lot of pressure to make a decision right there in the moment, but judges don't do that. They take their time, as they should. These are important issues. The legislature has been talking about Act 46 as well. The House had a bill in the House Education Committee for quite a while, and it was not coming out of the House Education Committee. And that would have been not to overturn anything, but just a one-year delay to the implementation of Act 46. Now, the House Ed Committee did not want it to come out. They were sort of split in half. So they did some political compromising, and the bill came out on the floor for a vote. It was a Wednesday and a Thursday back-to-back votes. On the Wednesday, they voted on a blanket year delay for everyone. And in fact, I think a school board could just say, yeah, we're not doing it if they voted. Not forever, but for a year's delay. And that vote did not pass the House. It was pretty close, but it didn't pass. The next day, they had one that sort of differentiated different school districts that were subject to mergers depending on their particular circumstances. Sheldon would be one that would have a delay in this amendment to, it's H39 is the bill. So that amendment and the bill itself did pass the House, but it has not left the Senate Education Committee. So there has not been any movement on the Senate side of things for there to be a delay. So right now, this is where we are. We have no judge saying stop. We have no legislature saying stop. So for right now, we're still under state board order. We're supposed to be moving forward toward mergers and conducting the activities necessary to do that. That includes, for Sheldon's, means that Laura is spending her time giving financial information to the business manager in Franklin Northeast Supervisor Union so that they can build a merged budget rather than have a separate local budget for Sheldon. Now, do we have that information? Absolutely. Judge makes a ruling tomorrow. That's a different, we're not starting from scratch. We've been working on parallel tracks as much, to the greatest extent possible. So, right now, this board doesn't have any of the local boards that are subject to this merger by the state board order. We don't really have the authority to present budgets because the boards are going to cease operations. So they won't be there next year to be managing the budget or the district or responsible for the education of students. So even that before we have that small delay in organizing, we still would not have had time to warn a budget. If nothing had changed, the Northern Mountain Valley School District may well have had a budget for town meeting. But because of the lawsuit and the delays, I think that was unique for Sheldon that you might have had that. The others never would have had a scenario where they'd be ready for town meeting. But at this point, the reality is they have it prepared, but it hasn't gone to a board that can adopt it and warn a vote. Whoops. Come on, Julie. So, everything I do now is like if this way and if the other, right? So, if there's no delay, no injunction, then the voters of Sheldon will have an opportunity to vote on a budget for the new NMVUUSD at a special election. This will be done by Australian ballot because that's how they have in their Articles of Agreement. And it would probably be late April. You have to have the organization, the swearing in of the board members, then they need to adopt a budget, and then it's 30 days. So it's probably late April before you'd be doing that.
So I don't know where to jump in and ask questions.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
As far as the budget is concerned, if we did merge,
Yeah.
how does that work? Is it just one budget and
Yep.
people just take whatever they need, and the school takes whatever they need? I mean, how do you combine it? Was it 4 different schools if we
Mhm.
merge?
So you build a budget. I can only speak, I've done this in my previous district in here. You build an expense budget based on how many teachers you have and how many staff you have and what supplies and materials and what the tuition's going to be for your high school students, all of those estimates. You do that in each building, and it is combined in terms of an expense budget, and then the way you apply revenue may be different. Because you're not looking at different tax rates. Well, you in the end do because of common level of appraisal, but you have sort of you have a one ed spending per equalized pupil rate for the whole
So how do you
district.
do it? So if Sheldon has more pupils in Montgomery, it would
It's
differ.
it's known because it will be one large pool of equalized pupils.
Okay.
That's what's
I
different.
see what you're
So
saying.
right now, you're very subject to losing, oh no, we lost 13 equalized pupils. That's going to be a hit to our local budget. Tax rate. When you have a larger district, it's still not a large district, but if you have 700 students, or is it closer to 900 that would be in this? I don't know.
4 schools were the biggest one at 2
Yeah.
something. We're
So
talking a
maybe
couple
not,
other schools are
maybe
100 kids,
maybe it's
maybe.
not 100 students. So
Yeah.
that sort of smooths out some of those bumps, peaks and
So
valleys,
they're
if
gonna
you
have to
will.
get their act together because we need to pay our taxes.
Yep.
The towns need.
Oh, I know
to-
your
the
town
towns
clerks
need
are
to-
just thrilled about all of
No, the
that.
towns need to function.
Yep.
And you can't really actually get a real tax bill to a homeowner until the school has a site, because the school budget is bigger than the town budget.
Right.
So you need, the legislator better be starting to think about this, because if they can't tax us for something right now you can't do nothing about because it ain't
Right.
there.
No, you'd end up with multiple, you'd have a municipal tax bill, and then you'd have an education tax bill that will come later, and none of the
What
town
I'm
clerks
saying
want
is,
that.
like anybody in this house, if you hold here, if you only paid your tax bill for your land, you'd be a happy person.
Absolutely.
Right.
But what's gonna happen is, we gotta educate people, but we gotta know what that is by
Yeah.
July or whatever she's saying. I mean, it's
The
like,
problem with a delay from a business perspective, and Kim can speak to this, is we don't get that tax, even if we know what the budget needs to raise, we don't get that right away. We don't get that for a few months into the new fiscal year, so we always
we
have
know
to
that.
borrow in
We know
anticipation.
that.
Yeah, so we have to borrow in anticipation of
Anticipation.
taxes. If we don't know what entity we are,
right.
or that Sheldon belongs to, they can't borrow in anticipation of taxes. So how do they operate? That's one of my concerns as the delays keep happening, is how do we actually cash flow?
So who determines the budget for this, for schools? Because we won't have our own school board anymore, right?
Right.
There'd be
It'll be
one school
two.
board.
And
You'd have 2 members on an 8-member
so
school
then the
board.
whole larger school board is going to do each individual school?
No, it's
No,
one
s-
budget. One
so,
budget.
One budget.
so
What do
the
they do?
budget
Each
would,
school prepare their budget, and they put them together, and then they complete it, so it's a cost per
No,
student? Is that
As,
what they're doing?
as a voter, you're gonna vote on one big budget.
yeah.
Right,
So
but how do
As
they
a
get to that
school
budget?
board, as a new Northern Mountain Valley School Board, yes, we would sit, the board would sit in the meetings, and they'd be looking at the schools, and the principals would sit and say, okay, this is
We
what we
need
need for
another
our school.
teacher.
And then as a board, they vote on that. And then you're looking at, one of the tricks is that, okay, so it's a board looking at 4 schools. So if Sheldon says they need another teacher, it might be, okay, so who's giving someplace else so they can get, because now you're working at, instead of here, we just focus on Sheldon. And, you know, if we need another elementary teacher, we pull from the middle school. Or, you know, we do something here or there. It's a bigger pool, but that 8-person board will be deciding kind of what each school gets. I mean, you'll be running it fairly normal, as in the schools all have their needs.
Right.
And that's where Julie said, you know, we're going to know how many kids we have, what our staff is, and, you know, then what you need for materials to run all of that. But yeah, it's the bigger board will be making those decisions on all of the schools.
Right,
So
instead of Sheldon deciding on Sheldon.
right, it's
Everybody's
going
gonna decide on what Sheldon needs and what Montgomery
isn't
needs
there
and
hope
Bakersfield needs.
for the board to be, that it's all schools are part of the board, it's not just individual schools.
Right.
It's gonna be all.
Right.
That's
the
the whole
board
Right.
and the board is supposed to act for the best interest of Northern Mountain Valley. So the theory behind it is, yes, there would be 2 board members from Sheldon, but they're not, it's not like the legislature. They're not representing Sheldon. They're going to be representing Northern Mountain Valley, just like the 2 people from Montgomery, from Berkshire, and from Bakersfield. And so as an entity, as they get working together, they'll be looking at the whole district. So they're not going to be working, like our Sheldon people aren't going to be working for Sheldon School. We're going to be working for Northern Mountain Valley.
Right, and you guys aren't gonna make the Northern Valley the final decision till all the boards sit together and make that decision.
Right, it'll always be made as an 8-person board. All decisions for all
And
the schools.
conceptually, that works, but what this all boils down to, for me, is that right now, Sheldon residents have 100% power on what happens in their school. Our board members are Sheldon residents. Their children and future children go to this school. When our Sheldon community members come to vote on our budget, 100% of the decision that's made on our budget is made by Sheldon people. If this merger goes through, our board, we go from 100% representation from Sheldon to 25.
Yeah,
And that's what's scary.
So-
My question on that
Absolutely.
is, yes, because we talked about that too, is if he's, like he's saying, it is, because you got, I don't know how I want to put that, but if you're trying to pay that, you're right, there's not 100% no more from the town people.
And conceptually.
Oh, I know, I was speaking theory, not,
Right.
not fact, but yes.
And
The other thing is, who's gonna own the school? That's what my
Yeah,
question
that's
was. Who owns the school now?
All 4 communities.
Yeah.
All communities own
Yep.
this school. All
Yep.
4 community owns
Yep.
Bakersfield, Montgomery?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's not just,
So-
what
So
we
now
hear
how-
all the time is, you know,
Buy it for
well,
$1.
yeah. Right.
To me is, the
Sheldon
Sheldon
owns
residents
them.
have worked hard to get what they have today,
Mhm.
okay? It's paid and bought for. Now we're letting, and I'm not saying Montgomery's is better, Bakersfield, or, who was the other one? Berkshire. And I know my sister's got a kid in Berkshire, and they just redid their school too. It's not fair for the taxpayers to lose total control of their building, their investment that they had done for years, and just and I don't think the legislator and I don't think the body on this is thinking that way.
No.
Right now, and I understand, it's important to educate our kids, but is this the right route? I read an article, the judge said state can't do that. I just read that last week. It was his article, the judges were adopted. But you don't know, but
Right.
it's true though. If you stop and think about it, I've lived in Sheldon almost my whole life. My wife has, and we've worked to get the school to where it is. Granted, it needs work, we all know that. But do you really want only 25% of voice on what happens on your town property, your town school, with your students?
And I also, I mean, just pure conjecture and opinion. When this whole process started, there was promise of great tax savings. That's no longer being talked about. Now we're talking about equity. That's debatable. I would really wonder if this whole thing goes through, how much of a difference you would see day to day inside these buildings. So the question is, do we shake all of this structure up to end up kind of, you know, from a day-to-day perspective where we are now? and have everything switched around. I'm not convinced that we're gonna see a huge tax savings. I'm not convinced that we're going to see Sheldon, you know, get a whole bunch of new teachers and stuff. I think day to day, it probably won't look very different. It's just,
And I don't see how the state can actually take what Sheldon has, that they own, and do what they're doing. I think that's what the judge was
Yeah,
saying.
and that's the center of, and the judge hasn't made a decision
No.
at all, but that's the core of the lawsuit, is a constitutional debate over whether the Agency of Ed and the State Board of Education have the authority to take the property from a school district that owns it and give it to another school district, a larger, different school district.
So why didn't they do that when these colleges were, Burlington College, all these little colleges like Trinity, CVU, all these, Champlain College, are the ones that were all struggling? Why didn't they think of that for a college forum? Instead of, you know, I mean.
So what's interesting about this bond is that, and this is sort of what you guys have been saying, is that this year, when we vote on this bond, it will be Sheldon voting on this bond. And if the bond doesn't pass, oftentimes you may see schools go the next year. They'll change it up, they'll take some things out, you know, try and adjust it so that it's something taxpayers are comfortable with. If this bond came back to taxpayers next year and we were merged, it wouldn't be a bond that would be presented by a Sheldon board. It would be presented by that larger board.
Possibly.
Possibly. If they decided to bond.
And it would be voted on the larger body of people.
It's gonna have to be, it's gonna have to be voted on the larger bond. If they go this way, they're gonna have to, the bond that you're working for is not gonna happen, because it's gonna go to a bigger quorum to vote on it, okay? And I can tell you, Sheldon's always taking care of itself. We have students that come back, that were students here that are teaching. We got folks that have, kids that stayed in Sheldon pretty good. We've lost a few good ones, but it's a lot to do with that, I think. I don't know how they can do that, but, I mean, if it works, all's good, but.
And so to go back to your question, Jack, that you had asked about how we feel about Actuary 6, yeah, well, and I think what our biggest concern was as a board, and the reason that we decided to join this lawsuit, was that in conversations that we had with the state, there was no, there was not a very good reason, for lack of a better word, or better term, there wasn't a good reason to move Sheldon to an MVU. The biggest piece that we were told was that it would create what they call a preferred structure in Franklin Northwest. So they could take the schools, Franklin, Highgate, Swanton, and MVU, and they could merge them into a structure that was preferred by the state. And so that was, I know for me, that was a big deal, because that's great for those schools if that's what the state, that's not great for those schools. I don't know that many of them agree with it, but if that's what the state decides for them. But for Sheldon, moving us to write something else just didn't feel good, you know, and I didn't feel as though there was justification given to move Sheldon in what I feel is a very drastic manner. Like, we're moving supervisor unions, so all of the stuff that the state has had us consolidate at the supervisor union level, special education, you know, all those services are now moving to a new supervisor union, and that, to me, is a large change. And if there's not a good reason to make that change, I don't think that it's worth making.
And we are maybe solitary, or at least incredibly unique in what we're being asked to do.
Right. Nobody else is in your position.
Most of the other places, when you're looking at Montgomery, Bakersfield, Berkshire, they're already under an SU. They already work together. You've got Franklin, Highgate, and Swanton, and MVU. They're already in a district. Even when they talk about the successful mergers, a lot of those successful mergers were schools that were together already. And so you're getting rid of school boards, and maybe some organizational pieces are clear, where we're being asked to completely jump ships, to go to a completely known but unknown entity, because we've never done business with them before, basically. And we're being asked to move. And as Julie was saying, when we were talking to the Secretary of Ed, and we started explaining where he goes, oh yeah, we didn't really think about that you're moving different SUs. And that was incredibly concerning, because we were like, that's what we presented, and you didn't really look at the schools in detail. You just looked from that bird's eye view of
Right.
K-8, that looks good, K-6, that looks good, and we want them to work together and just kind of put them together.
So another thing is our pupils are gonna be, is Bakersfield, Berkshire, Montgomery and us, but yet none of our kids are gonna go to those schools.
No,
Okay, so,
unless they have a.
so now that you're already an outsider. As far as I'm concerned, with those 3 schools, you're already an outsider. Because those kids are gonna go to Richford. Bakersfield might go to BFA or Enosburg. Our students usually is Enosburg, Missisquoi, or BFA, as far as I know.
Yep.
And where does the majority go? BFA.
Well, it's Enosburg.
And Enosburg now. Now it's
Yeah,
finally
now
split.
it's Enosburg.
But back when we were kids.
I think that had something to do with some of the decision-making too. I think one of those state board, they kept saying, well, more kids go to Enosburg, so it's a natural fit.
It's like 3 or 4 kids.
Yeah.
When you break it down, they look at
Right,
percentage, but when you
right.
actually break it down, it's like 3 or 4 more kids go to Enosburg than BFA.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
know for years, the school board has
This
been
year.
talking about, some years, we're gonna either have to get on board with Missisquoi,
Yeah.
or get on board with BFA or Enosburg, which I understood that part. I mean, that's common sense in a way, but then again, it's like, I feel real sick to my heart just thinking that we're gonna give up our little community, things that we've always earned as kids growing up, paid for, took pride in our schools, to see it be thrown in with 3 other schools that we had never dealt with or dealt with.
It's a huge, as much as Franklin, Highgate, and Swanton are not happy about the merger, and 2 out of 3 of those communities have signed on to the lawsuit as well, it's a very different story when you talk to individual board members. They'll say, we don't want it, but of course I know we'll work well together. We always have, we will continue. You know, there's that reassurance that no matter what happens, it will be okay, because they know they have those relationships. For teachers in particular, and this board's been fabulous at really looking out for teachers and students, obviously, but it has a direct impact because it's a complete change of employer, and very different, just very different environment. Although the school building will be the same, you'd still come to the same place to work, and the children are the same. There are enough things that would be
I don't want to
different.
sell the Sheldon School for $1. Sorry.
Well, and again, it's not anything any of us in this room can do anything about one way or the other. At this point, it is in the hands of a judge, or it's only a judge, the courts can say we're not doing it, or the legislature could undo Act 46, which it's not going to do. It could delay it. I believe they might delay it, especially since we've had a lot of these organizational meetings that people have postponed for yet another month. Then we're getting to the pragmatically, you just might not be able to do everything you need to do to merge, right? So there may be a delay that comes out. But, you know, in terms of changing the law, really only a court can say it's not constitutional and kick it to the legislature to do something different.
And we
But you know,
also-
when it first came out,
Yeah.
everybody was saying, it'll save taxpayers money. You know, and, you know, sometimes you just say that and everybody's on board. Everybody, there ain't a person in this room that doesn't want to
Wanna
save
save
taxes.
taxes, that's for
Okay?
sure.
I think that, you know, this, I felt personally it was a shady tactic the way the state poised it anyway. The state said, you know, you can do it now and save, or we'll make you do it anyway and you won't save. And in the end, that saving's not gonna pan out anyway. You can ask the communities a lot of that merge. But another thing that we have to keep in mind is that this isn't just the legislature acting without our input. A lot of these communities have voted overwhelmingly not to do this, and the state structure has essentially said, we really don't care about the decision that your town made. We're gonna force you to do it anyway, and that's just a whole nother, you know, that really is the cherry on top, that, you know, not only did they not ask us when we opposed, they said, we really don't care about your opinion as communities.
How are the taxes going to be determined? If you're taking 4 towns to make a budget, then how do they determine the tax rate?
Go, Laura.
Are they going to do the same for
I'll
every
say
town?
something wrong.
They'll take all of the expenses from all 4. They'll take all the revenue from all of them and subtract it from that. And then they'll get, that's your net ed spending for all the new
4 schools.
whatever the acronym is. And then they'll take your cumulative equalized pupil number, so all the which is not your enrollment, it's called an equalized pupil. It's a 2-year weighted average of students, and different students have different weights. They'll divide your net ed spending by that equalized pupil number for all the schools, and then they'll get your spending per equalized pupil. That is what will then go to your towns and have your CLA applied and determine your tax rate.
So it
So
will
really
be
the only
different
thing-
for it'll be different for each town, even though we'll be voting on the same
Budget.
overall budget number, the tax implications would be different for each town because then it goes
Because
to
of
your
the
CLA.
But that would be the only factor.
Where are they getting any savings? They're talking about tax savings.
Yeah.
Where is it coming from?
They think that merged districts should gain efficiencies over time, and I also think it goes back to the peaks and valleys that Julie Regenbald was speaking about, that right now, if Sheldon, like last year, Sheldon had to make some very severe cuts to the budget, not because their spending was too high, but because they lost some equalized pupils. And because of the spending across the state was projected to be high, which impacts all the towns. So theoretically, what they're saying is, from year to year, Sheldon would have to make less adjustments because those peaks and valleys, or those large expenses, or the impact of things that are done statewide, would have less of a severe impact on each individual school, and it would sort of be mitigated over time. So it would sort of, the tax rate might continue to go up. I don't ever see it not doing
Yeah,
that.
let's be
But it
clear.
won't just spike and then come down. Like if you had a really expensive student move into Sheldon, or maybe 5 or 6, and they were going to the most expensive high school, so those tuition bills were super high, that hits Sheldon really hard, and Sheldon only. And what they're thinking is if you were sharing those costs over 4 towns, yes, your tax rate would go up, and those towns would too, but it wouldn't be like this giant spike and then a drop when they left, and then a giant spike when something else happened for Sheldon, and then a giant drop. That's what they're thinking is gonna happen.
What's the amount of students today compared to what it used to be? I mean, the cost is getting more expensive, which I understand everything else is, but most average family today is probably 2 kids, 3 kids. Back when I grew up, my mistakes was 9 kids to a family, or 8. So why is it not?
Well, Vermont is struggling.
Why is it not planing off here somewhere?
Yeah, Vermont is struggling overall with our population. We're all, speak for myself, older than
We're all baby boomers.
other states. We had 110,000 students just 20 years ago, and now we have right around 80,000 students as a state. And we still have the same amount of schools and probably more teachers than we used to have, because we all know
Oh, yeah.
the needs are not,
Well,
everything
it's
gets
changed,
tougher. So, we definitely, and we also have that same crisis with working adults. We're gonna have most of us retiring in the next 10, 20 years.
Oh, 1
And
year.
there aren't gonna be any, some of us will never retire, we're
I'm gonna
just,
enjoy it 1 year. Last
but, there are fewer and fewer working people in Vermont to support a larger and aging population, and fewer students than before. So, it's an issue in Vermont across all levels. You asked what we think of Act 46. I think it's been really tough in our communities to see this particular part of it implemented, which is the stick part and not the carrot part of that law. It's worked well in some places, it's struggled in other places. I think it depends on the town and the community and how well boards come together to work together. But I think it's been a real hardship watching the members of our communities struggle with this law, and it's been awful tough to watch the impact on teachers. Not kids,
Because it is going to be tough. It's going to be tough in a way because you're not going to have control of your school anymore. And the trouble with that is,
That's the
You could
biggest
be,
thing
you
for
could,
Vermont.
you could get 6 of those board members that don't like Sheldon
Right.
for some reason. Not that they should. If you're a board member, you should vote equal
Yeah.
and work together. That doesn't always happen, because I've been on boards. So it's like, I don't know. It's
Well, I
gonna be
think
interesting. I'm
that's,
glad I
yeah,
didn't get the
that's
kids
gonna be
voting.
tough. I think, Julia, are you going to be voting, if you merge, will you be voting on all the members of the boards?
I believe it's at large.
So that would be, you know, if you've got board members that you don't think represent Sheldon from the other communities, you at least would have an opportunity to vote them out and vote for someone else. But that's, you know, and show up and make your voice heard until they pay attention to our
It's all
community.
politics.
But it's gonna be,
It's all politics.
well, school boards are politics. They always
Oh, I
have
know,
been.
I know.
But they've been local. They're just, they're redefining what
I know.
local is, and it's gonna be a huge shift for our small rural Vermont communities. It just is. I've lived in Swanton for almost 20 years. I had no idea I lived in the big city till, you know, the communities of Highgate and Sheldon and Franklin have been like, oh, Swanton.
What needs to happen, and it's sad to say,
Yeah,
is legislators have to become younger.
yep,
And I'm old, but you know what? You shouldn't serve on the legislative board for more than 10 years. President of the United States serves in the United States for only 8 years. We got people in legislature that have been there 25, 30 years.
yes, we do.
And you gotta start looking at this younger generation for better ideas. And the younger generation are the ones that are gonna make this world function, not you and I in 10 years.
Yeah. I agree with you there.
Very sad when you know, look at government shutdown for how many months? I mean, days, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, that shouldn't happen. I mean, a lot of this stuff shouldn't happen. It's all politics.
I think they get rid of a lot of that if they make it a one term for all your legislatures.
Not necessarily
That
one
way
term,
they
because you
wouldn't-
gotta have, you got
You
some
wouldn't
people that
have
are
this
good.
bullshit if you vote for mine and I'll vote for yours later. You wouldn't have that anymore.
Right, but I
You get
think,
a lot of that politics.
but you
out.
do have some good people out there that could
Yeah,
serve
you
more
do.
than one term. And that's where it's kind of,
But there's too many that aren't that way.
we're getting off Act 46, but that's what, it is. It's going back to legislator.
Yeah.
Legislation's gonna make the final decision on this. It's not the taxpayers. Taxpayers elect these legislators, people, so. Learn enough from me, honey?
The only thing I want to make sure that I share with you before we stop, because this is a great conversation, is that if there is a delay or if the judge does grant an injunction, then we would develop a local Sheldon budget. We'd adopt it and bring it to the voters for a local Sheldon budget. So we wanted to make sure we did, and that we have those scenarios laid out. And the same with school board members. Right now, you're not voting on any school board members. If you do merge, there will be an election for the budget as well as school board members to Northern Mountain Valley. If there is an injunction, you don't merge, you'd have the local budget special meeting and election of board members for Sheldon at that time
How many
too.
board members? Just one? Two.
So that
Northern
would
Mountain.
happen, so if
For
this
the
does,
for the new board?
No, if you didn't go to the new board, our own board, how are you gonna do that?
So if there was an injunction and we had a delay, we had to carry on as the Sheldon board, we would warn a special meeting to do that budget and we would elect somebody, because, so my term is up.
Just your term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so-
These
so-
two will appoint Julia, whether she wants it or not. No,
My
that's not
question
true. But they would appoint Julia for the rest of this year or until there's an
So
election.
my question is, when it does go to this school,
Yeah.
because it looks like it's gonna go whether we want it to
Yeah.
or not. So is the town of Sheldon gonna get to elect 2 board members for their community?
No. The
Who
whole,
elects them?
the
So,
whole district.
Oh, that's wrong.
So Jack,
they
say
know.
you wanted to be on the new board,
Yeah.
right?
No,
So
thank
you.
you will have to, are you sure?
You should, it sounds like you're passionate.
So you would get a petition and you'd get it signed by a certain number of people
Mhm.
and you would present it and people from Berkshire, Bakersfield, and Montgomery are also doing the same. And so then they take all those people who've gotten their petitions done, and they'll put them on the ballot, and everybody will vote, and they'll vote for 2 members from Sheldon
How
and
would you know
2
how to
from
vote
Berkshire.
in another town?
What's that?
How would you know how to vote for another town?
Right.
That's what I'm
don't
saying,
know
I'm saying,
that.
why don't, if they do this, it's all okay, but okay, now Sheldon still wants their say, they wanna elect their 2 board
Right.
members. And Bakersfield should elect their 2 board members, Berkshire should elect their 2, and who's the other team? Montgomery.
Yep. Well, and so
I-
that's what's hard about us moving to this new situation is that this was already an existing district. So on top of everything else, they're forcing us into an existing district who has already developed their articles of agreement, the way they're gonna operate. So like how they're gonna vote for board members, whether they're gonna do an Australian ballot or vote from the floor for the budget. You know, like all those things they've already established. So they have those rules already. And
Though-
we just
So will the
come in
town of
with them.
Sheldon still get to vote for their board members, is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
Yeah.
If you're voting for,
You're gonna vote-
Like Sue said, I don't know.
You're
There's
gonna-
lines away,
Yeah.
there's no more
If it's-
lines.
You're
They're
gonna
one
vote
pool.
for 8 board members
Yeah.
Yeah.
for Northern Mountain Valley, and I guess we haven't seen the what the rules are, but I'm assuming that they probably go on some type, like we have, some type of rotation
Yep.
Yeah.
as you go on. So
They
you're not voting
stagger
8
them.
new,
Yeah.
yeah, 8 new every time. They'd stagger out the terms,
Right.
but you'd be voting initially on an 8-person board. Obviously, the first couple of votes are going to be, I guess, awkward is the best way to say it, or uninformed, because you're not going to know
You don't
these
know
people
them,
from the
right.
other communities, and that's where Julie had mentioned that's where people are going to have to start paying attention. So then you can at least see how the current board members
Right.
are acting to see if you want to continue to re-elect them. It is confusing because I work in a merged district, and this has been explained to me, and you know, neither here nor there, but I'm a history teacher, so like the way that the governance of the representation of a merged board it works against how we think regular legislation works, which is in Montpelier, we vote on people from our district to represent Sheldon
Right.
or Franklin County.
Savage, man, well.
Right.
Yeah.
But with the merged district,
You're voting
we're
for
not
everyone.
voting on Sheldon representatives alone. We're voting on all of them because in theory they're supposed to be equally weighted out.
Yes,
So
sir.
it's different than what we're used to
Yep.
for governance of things. It's definitely a different idea.
That's why,
out
like
there.
Sue says, Bakersfield should nominate their 2 that they think will do a good job for them. Berkshire should do their 2 at voting time.
Yeah.
Montgomery should do their 2, and Sheldon should do the 2 people that they think will do the best. Not let all the communities, they don't know you guys. How do they know how good you are? How do you know what you do with our pupils? They
We're
don't
really
know.
good.
They ain't gonna know.
When your district
you
merged,
guys are really good.
I may be wrong on this, but did representation on the board, did that come down to the amount of voters in the district, right? Because you guys, the Maple Run board isn't 2 from Fairfield, 2
No.
from.
Right.
No,
It's
it's
nice.
4 and 2 that equal 1 from
Right,
Fairfield.
so Fairfield, when they merged, went from a
It's
5-person
nice.
board, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, you're right.
So
Yeah.
Fairfield went from a 5-person board that was 5 Fairfield residents that made the decision to 2 half votes on a board of how many?
It's 9.
Yep.
So that
They
they got
don't
no
need-
say, really.
They get, right, they get, if their 2 members vote together, they get 1/9.
And if you
But
don't
it's
like what's going
not
on, the
supposed to
town
be
of
that way.
Fairfield's
The
not
board's
gonna be able to
supposed to be
change
for
it.
every
Well, that's the thing, and, you know,
school, not
I have been told, and as I explained to you, that Maple Run board is unified and they're looking out for the interest of all of the schools. At least that's how they've behaved, and that's kind of that. I hate to say that's the marching orders they've been given,
Right.
But in not a fine way, but that's basically how it's
Yeah.
all been explained to them, and.
And that's well and good, but we have to remember that going to this new district, Sheldon will be the largest school in this new district, right?
Mhm.
So when you stack up these 4 schools together, right, and you say, we have a shortage, or we need to cut somewhere, right? They're not gonna go to the school with the least amount of employees to cut, right? Sheldon's gonna be the top of the pile. So, I mean, we have to remember that, I mean, to think of Sheldon as a large school is a little mind-boggling to me. I've never thought of it
It's like
that way.
Swampville,
Yeah, if you
a big
live up there, you
town.
know it.
Right, but now what I'm saying is we are now the higher end school, and when things get shaken out and redistributed, that's another thing we have to think about.
But you guess you would have to hope that they're thinking of the children, not just the school or the town. It's of each pupil.
Absolutely, yeah, but I
So-
mean, it even philosophically makes sense. Why would you take from a school that has less? right? I mean, you would think you would always go for this.
Right, if you had to have a budget cut, and Sheldon's the biggest school, the other ones are having a hard time with what they got, Sheldon would be the ones getting cut.
Well, I mean,
To some degree, though, that those,
would hopefully be mitigated, right?
well, no, but to some degree, Sheldon's already the victim of that, because that's the part that people don't realize, is it is a state ed fund now. So Sheldon just last year was the victim of spending across the state.
Right.
And had to make cuts and had to make
Oh, yeah.
sacrifices, and to no
Because of
fault of Sheldon.
Burlington and other
Right.
communities spending
And
impacted
and
your
lack
tax
of
rate.
loss of equalized pupils statewide
Yep.
and spending going up.
So that
Yeah.
doesn't really count, then it would be just these towns. It's statewide.
Yeah, I know.
Right, it still will be statewide.
It
I guess
will always
that's my
be, yeah.
big point
Yeah.
as a business manager is trying to get people to understand how much the spending across the state influences your tax rates.
It does now.
Property
anyway.
values and spending across the state. What your budget in Sheldon includes is like minimal.
Well, and that's what we found
Ridiculously
last year when we were doing
minimal.
the budget, was
Yeah.
that we made significant cuts and we saw very little impact to our tax rate.
Right.
That was the most frustrating
Yeah.
process to go
It
through.
is. If your
because-
CLA goes down, your equalized pupil drops a little bit, and that yield changes, which is because of statewide spending, your tax rate could be 15 cents higher than it was the year before, and Sheldon's done nothing to, no gain to the school.
I know and you guys can correct me, but as a board, the unknown is really scary.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why. And we
Very.
thought we were being singled out to move, and that was a concern of ours for why we're part of this lawsuit and everything. The other thing is we know we have a good working relationship with Franklin Northwest, which is why we wanted to stay there. I think some of the scenarios of what may happen if we get moved are a little extreme in worrying about all of the staff movement. There are some security things with a small school. You get those bubble classes where sometimes you do have to look at cutting a teacher, whereas we'd be able to roll with those dips in population. So I think that's where we've weighed things out. And we would just like to stay with our known partners that we've had and we're comfortable working with. And we think we've started to round the corner and making some good progress with this school. And like you said, all of the shakeup that's going to happen for moving, what will it really change in the long run? Is it going to make us better?
What's the trade-off?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where we're...
And
So we've been working through, given the fact that we can't control any of it, which
So why are we
is
sitting here then?
one of the most frustrating parts.
Wasting my
It's
time and
informing.
everybody else's time. It's informing, all right.
But we are trying to do the best that we can
Maybe somebody will listen.
to
Maybe you can
prepare.
go to State House and talk.
Yes.
Take the hotel in Sheldon with me.
Well, like your budget, you said that instead of having these dips and
Yeah.
jumps, it would be smoothed out.
Well,
But it's because it's averaged with the other schools. But if you take a 5-year average of our own school, you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, if they look, I agree with you. It kills me that they only compare your spending to last year.
right.
Yeah.
It's not fair,
No.
right? Because I could overinflate my budget last year, and then this year say, oh, I'm coming in at a 0% increase this year. Look at me, I'm great. I agree with you. It's a
Bunch of,
flawed system.
It sure
bunch
is.
of bull. It's getting the state involved, and every time they get involved, everybody gets screwed.
Yeah.
Period. Excuse my language, but it's just the way I
We
feel.
know what you mean.
Yeah. Politics.
Told you that, nobody listens. All right, guys, thank you.
Yes.
You're done, right?
Yeah, I didn't have anything else. I just wanted to make
Nobody
sure
else is showing
people,
up.
If you
had an
have
opportunity.
questions as you're looking over the materials
Yeah.
from now until town meeting or even after, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We'd be happy to chat.
So I guess I do have one more question, and back to the school board, the unified school board. If we don't, if like Sheldon doesn't elect their 2 members to go onto the board, how do you stop the other 3 schools from putting their people in on the board supposedly representing Sheldon?
you have to be from the town. You have to be a resident of the town.
So then, in a way, Sheldon does have a choice on who's going
Absolutely.
on
Yeah.
for our board. Okay, I guess I thought I.
Yeah,
So there are
no,
two
that was-
Sheldon spots, but
Right.
everybody in all 4 communities votes on those people. They're Sheldon residents, but everybody gets to vote on.
So, but the town could decide on the two that are gonna go on.
You put your
the
people
ballot.
up.
Oh, yeah.
And
You
then-
have to fill out your petitions and put them with your own town clerk, and verifying that it's Sheldon residents
And so
that
if,
are,
when
yeah.
the whole board votes on these that wanna run, if they vote against the two Sheldon
No,
people,
Sue, it's gonna be an Australian ballot, and you have to pick 2 from Sheldon, 2 from Berkshire,
Mhm.
2 from Montgomery, and 2 from
It's like when you
Bakersfield.
vote
okay, and it's gonna
And
be, and it's gonna
And then could be
be,
4 in each,
it's gonna
each
be
town, but
presented
you only
that
pick
way
2.
as the town.
Yes.
Yes.
Because if you
Yes.
didn't know the name, you
Right.
wouldn't necessarily.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
MVU
Yes.
does,
All right.
you guys don't vote on MVU's budget, but I do, and it's the same thing. I mean, I don't know anybody in Highgate, I don't know anybody in Franklin, I may know the Swanton people, but it's vote for no more than 2, and they have it by town.
I
Like
can vote
that.
for no
Okay.
more than 2.
But what will be important is that Sheldon community members show up to vote.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you
Right.
don't
And that
show
could
up
be
to
a
vote,
vote
and in
too.
the other
Yeah,
towns they do
absolutely.
show up to vote, then you have less, you know,
And
theoretically, if
they
you have
don't
more voters, you have more say.
understand this, Yeah.
And,
Right.
and it'll, what is so important about that fact is that it won't necessarily be in Sheldon. Like, their annual meetings or their board meetings may not be in Sheldon. And so that will be really important to get the word out to people that
Yes.
So
we're gonna have to
that's-
travel.
If they're smart, that new board would rotate.
Right.
I was just gonna
Because
suggest that,
they need to
yes.
get to know the community.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in other words, too, they would have to politic in our town, so
Yeah.
you're gonna get to know who they are, because they're gonna be coming to our town for our vote. Bakersfield, Montgomery, and Berkshire.
Yep.
'Cause
They should.
they will want you to know who they are,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody, for turning out.
Yes.
So will you be discussing this at town meeting? I know we're voting Australian, but
Yeah,
usually when the school
so.
session takes over, you'll be discussing this so the people, I mean, there's not that many people here tonight as
So-
compared to what hopefully will be there on town meeting.
The best thing would be for the town of Sheldon to pass this bond, if we are, no bank choice of, we're gonna do this. It'd be best for the town of Sheldon to pass this bond to fix this school now, because if we don't vote on it now, it goes to the other people, they may decide that we don't need all these changes.
Right.
Correct.
And we're gonna be in worse shape than we are. So
You have
that's the
control right
envelope
now.
you guys need to push more as a board for this school, is that this is the year we should do it. Things are cheaper, but if we don't do it this year, they may not let us do it. I mean, some taxpayers probably don't wanna do it.
Eventually,
I
they
mean,
would
don't-
have to, you
I
have
was
to
gonna say,
have a school.
don't they
but-
have, if they have all the schools equally in mind, don't they have to, some of these.
Well, they would, but they
wanna
wouldn't
do
do,
require.
they probably wouldn't do so much of
Yeah.
the.
It's harder to pass.
Yeah.
Or they would pick and
harder
choose what
to
they wanted
Right.
to do.
They
They'd pick
maybe not
what we
do the
really
role.
needed, but they wouldn't do our siding or our windows, because, oh, you can get away with that.
And there may be another school in that district that has a more pressing need. So typically at town meeting, we have a school section and we discuss school business, but there's no school business. However, we did keep that section within town meeting, so we will, we'll go up at town meeting
So
and basically we'll
present
go up
this
to answer
again
questions.
to the ones that weren't here tonight.
Yeah.
Because I think, people aren't gonna understand this,
Well,
you know.
We've
unless
been
they-
living it. We've been living it, and
Yeah.
we're still trying.
You guys
Yeah.
still don't understand. That's why the first
We
question,
like to
that's
think
why
we
the
do.
first question of the night was, what do you guys think about it? You guys been around it a lot more than we have. I read the paper every day, and it's like,
Yeah, we
yes,
think
no,
it gives
yay,
us a
no,
headache.
and no choice.
That's what we.
So we'll present sort of a smaller, shorter version of this and ask our questions and try and answer them the best we can.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna tell you then, the school board, the school meeting's gonna last longer than it has been if we bring this up.
Well, that might be nice, because
That will
usually it's
be.
a whole 5-minute, like.
Yeah, you guys, town stuff takes till 1 o'clock, and
Right,
school's like half an hour and they're gone. And I don't understand that, because the school budget is like 4 times higher than the town. So why are we arguing about $100 piece of equipment or $100,000 piece of equipment? We're talking,
But at
That's
the school
the way it
meeting, they
is.
can't bring up the budget, can they?
what's that?
No,
At the, at
nothing
the
can.
town meeting, they can't bring up the budget.
No,
Right.
That's
they
why
can't.
there's no
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
Well, they can
ask questions.
thumbs down, then they gotta redo it. They've had it here, Sheldon's had it a couple times
Well,
and
that's
they didn't
'cause it's
pass.
They
Australian
voted on it
now.
first, though.
Yeah.
They didn't
But
pass.
they
voted
can't,
Australian, so at
but
the
at
town meeting, you
they
cannot bring
can't
it.
actually
Right,
discuss the
right,
budget
right.
They
because
can't
it's-
cut anything.
Exactly.
Or add.
Right.
You can talk about it, but you
Right.
can't, oh, you just can't make
But that's-
changes.
But
Yeah.
that's why there's never
I
been
know,
any
I was
discussion.
on the
because
board, we had to go back once and
Right.
sharpen our
Oh,
pencils.
Yeah.
Oh.
I know the school had to go back once and sharpen their pencil while I was on the board, select board, so it does. Sometimes it don't hurt to keep the pencil sharp. But then you got some people in town that try to keep it too sharp. It's crazy.
If they don't merge, what happens? We just stay by ourselves?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just continue
Business as usual.
as usual.
But that's likely, and that's, that ain't never gonna happen, right? Not with all this money. It'd be like the Obama healthcare, right? Let's
It's
go
an
to that
uphill
one.
battle.
Yeah. It's,
Took them years to get it up, and then they just threw it out the door, you know, it's like,
The way it is right now, we will be merging unless
Yes.
we prevail in court or the legislature does something.
and by July 1st, they're gonna have to, because there's gonna be no tax money to take care of stuff.
Yeah, I think.
you hope they have
If I were
that,
betting
you hope they
for
have that
July
date in mind.
I mean, the school survives.
I'm gonna be calling
the-
Kim
the
like-
school- Yeah, the school survives on the town money till the school gets the money. So it's not gonna be pretty if, you know, we have to, I know our budget ain't big enough to supply the school on enough.
No, we borrow.
We borrow.
The board-
Yeah, I know
the school
that, yeah.
borrows, yeah.
If
But
they
if you
say
can't
there's no
borrow,
budget, this town pays the school, we have no money to pay you people.
Yeah, that's the trouble, that's what I'm saying.
Summer break will just be longer. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
This is not a scenario.
no.
It's what keeps Laura and I up in the middle of the
Oh,
night.
I was gonna say.
You don't want
It's crazy.
It's not
I've
gonna
seen
happen.
crazier things happen.
Yeah.
Both scenarios are not great. Like, I understand the feelings about Act 46 and
Yeah.
merging, but not knowing
It's worse. than
and not being
merging.
able to
Yeah, we need
plan
some
and not
direction.
is probably the
Well,
worst
And that's
evil.
where I'm coming
Yeah.
from with voting for this bond.
Right.
And and not having a budget that we can vote on too. That's really scary for me.
Mhm.
It's a lot of unknowns,
And
absolutely.
it's not right. You know, does the state even care? They don't care that they put us in this position.
Yeah.
But because the board has been kicking this can down the road for years now, with trying to find the right time to fit it in financially, and knowing that you're going to merge, and like you were saying, if the expenses would be shared, and it's your last chance to vote solely by Sheldon, it's sort of like you're in a, in a pickle.
I felt they had to do it.
And we worked hard to get it done for town meeting. We don't control the school budgets
Right,
and getting that done. This is what we could control, this is what we got done.
yeah.
This could be the
And
last
I
year we can't
understand that.
control it.
Yeah.
It's just,
It is frustrating, it's
but
yeah,
scary to
not
think
be able
about
to
not
not know
knowing.
which way the budget's gonna go.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
And some people are really on fixed income, and it is tough.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Some people live paycheck by paycheck, like some of those people that didn't have a
I
paycheck.
don't get raises, but everything else goes up.
Right.
You know?
So it does make it tough on certain people, you know, and it is
Sure
hard.
does.
It's very hard.
You guys been doing a great job.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you for
Hope to see
coming.
you next week.